No CPI this morning, but we've got other economic data coming your way. We've got some earnings to talk about. Adobe, Tesla just can't stop, won't stop. Brand new all-time highs on Tesla, brand new all-time highs on the NASDAQ. We'll talk about what happened yesterday. We've got Dennis Dick Triple D initiating coverage on a stock. We will talk about that as well. I've got my man Christian Fromhertz here hanging out backstage. Let's go ahead and get pre-market prep started. We've got some great guests today coming on as well. Eric Krull going to be talking some IPOs. Excited about that to catch up with Eric as well. Let's go ahead and start the show, and we'll catch up with Christian when we come back.
The volatility right now is really incredible.
Wow, look at that consolidation on the upper right chart.
You know what we've seen this earnings season? Some of these expected moves get even more violent. And this is why I have switched my strategy 10 years ago. And if you're chasing, you're in trouble.
Alrighty, y'all. Let's go ahead and bring my man Christian on the stream. We'll go ahead and talk about what happened yesterday. Going to pop your charts up as well. How you doing this morning, Christian?
Good morning, AB. Yeah, just kind of, getting ready for today and, just obviously noticing what happened yesterday. We'll kind of start. I think that's a good place to start this morning. It's just super strong, the Magnificent Seven, or the Great Eight, as I like to call them. But bottom line, the Qs made a new high yesterday. Outside of that group, not a lot of strength, not a lot of things going on. But in terms of momentum, certainly the big cap tech have it. We'll talk about Tesla in a minute. I'm going to go through the usual rundown just to kind of talk about what things are moving this morning. S&P futures are down 20 basis points. And I think what was really interesting that caught my eye yesterday, again, I'll talk a little bit about that breadth, overall market breadth, not particularly strong. But here's the S&P that didn't quite make it to new highs. Now, we did see a nice bounce. There's a technical level that I was watching yesterday, 6,039.75, where we did see a nice technical bounce. The question is, are we going to see some participation from other areas of the market? Are we going to see some type of a shift? Maybe that 830 number that we've got with the PPI might kind of shed some light on that. But let me just take you around overall. We'll take a look at what crude is doing and some of the other areas of some of the other commodities. Crude is up about 1/3% this morning. Nat gas this morning is down 2.2% this morning. Copper, which I tend to like to go through some of these commodities too, just to kind of give you a sense of what's going on here, is up about 1/4%. No major change in trend. I mean, a lot of these commodities remain quiet. Let's look at what bonds are doing. Bonds, we had a 10-year bond auction. Let me just bring up my notes really quick. I want to see if that's it for bond auctions this week. I think there's 3 of them. We got the 30-year bond. So yesterday was the 10-year bond auction. Today is the 30-year bond auction. All of those bond auctions come at 1 o'clock, but you can kind of see what's happening with bond yields. Obviously, bond prices have been going down, and that means yields are going higher. So that's quietly been happening the last couple days. Just wanted to bring up what gold is doing as well, and then we'll lead and then we'll talk about Bitcoin a little bit. But gold down a little bit, retracing some of that move, but really nice candle yesterday. Kind of got lost in the price action yesterday, but the gold has put in nice 3 days of gains, gets you over those November 25th highs and starting to get closer to those previous highs. But if you're looking for an opportunity in gold to get involved, down 70 basis points today, retracing some of that big green candle yesterday, not a bad place. And then this was the other thing that was very strong yesterday, which was Bitcoin getting back above the 100,000 level. Did not make new highs, but that's a nice kick back up. Very strong, the crypto stocks and Bitcoin, as well as the Qs. We can talk about a couple of the big movers yesterday. AB, I know we were talking a little bit about one of the leaders yesterday, which was Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, this is a stock. I mean, if Dennis was here, I know we probably would have already spent the first 5 minutes of the show on it, but he's not. So we're getting to it late, which means we're getting to it at 8:05 this morning. Tesla got up to $430 a share yesterday. I mean, this thing has just been an absolute monster. I believe it's up 70% since the election, which was just a little bit over a month ago. The election was on November 5th. It's now December 12th, and Tesla has gone up 70% since then, which you might be like, okay, well, Aaron, that's a month. 70% is not that big of a move. For now a $1.35 trillion company, that's a huge move. I mean, to move that much in about a month, I've been wrong on this, Christian. I don't know. Like I haven't been really in. I mean, I have exposure to Tesla through just owning the Qs and the SPY and stuff, but I don't have any outright Tesla shares, and I've been completely wrong about not holding Tesla. But I think we're at a point now. You might have some people come in and try to buy puts, short it. I don't think anyone in the history of the stock market has ever successfully shorted Tesla. So I'm not going to, but I'd be worried about buying it all the way up here. But again, I said that 100 points ago, and now we're 100 points higher. So I've just been completely wrong on this stock. I don't know what else to say other than just that the move has been incredible over the past, week and a month. But again, I would be worried about buying it up here. I'm not going to try to short it up here though either. So it's kind of just in no man's land for me.
Yeah, and it's up another buck this morning, so we're above 425. 420 was a big level that was being talked about on Twitter yesterday, but I mean, it's been a tremendous move, and it's interesting when you put it into the context of how much it's moved over the last month or so is pretty tremendous. I also like how you kind of phrased it where you don't have any directly, but if you look at the Qs have Tesla has a weight of 5%, so you do own it indirectly, and that's a good way to kind of look at whether or not you do have exposure to it, because it is now 5% of the Qs, so that's going to impact things a bit. From a very technical level, what I've got drawn, and I tend to do this when names have been haven't reached their new highs for a while, and then just like yesterday, or this week, I should say, have broken above those recent 2021 highs. I basically just say, okay, because I think to your point, it's not easy to say, oh, at this point, I'm going to get involved in the name. So I kind of just, take a look at it and say, okay, well, what's a meaningful level at this point? And if you were to initiate a new long, what would you go long against? And I would say, and again, this is like a very keep it simple type trade or technical analysis, but just watch those previous highs, right? Because we don't know if this is going to continue to kind of go up into the upper right. We don't have any resistance now. So I think, at this point, just very, very simple trade would be watching those previous highs, which is right around 407.
There you go. And then I just wanted to go back to Bitcoin real quick, because that was the other, Bitcoin and Tesla kind of sometimes trade together. I mean, both kind of hit new all-time highs yesterday. I know Bitcoin didn't technically, but got back above 100,000. And like I mentioned yesterday, though, that if I were to make a new trade on Bitcoin, I wouldn't want to buy right here. It seems like around the 100,000, 99,000, 101,000. There's just a bunch of sell orders that people are kind of ready to take some profits there. If it gets up above 105 to that 110, then I could be interested in buying it again up here. Like that would give me conviction that, okay, the rally can continue beyond 100,000. But right now, as it's just hovering around this level, it's again kind of similar to Tesla, just in a no man's land for me, where it's not that. I don't have conviction if I was buying Bitcoin here that it's going to keep going higher in the short term. I mean, in the long term, it seems like Bitcoin just keeps going higher. But I wouldn't be surprised to see this dip below 100,000 again at some point over the next couple of days. And then if we get another reversal and another leg higher above 105, 110, then I'm a little bit more interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, clearly that was a very nice move yesterday, but we're not above the highs from last week, and that's what I've got. I've got just a 1 hour chart of Bitcoin, just basically showing when it made those highs, and so that's definitely something that I'm watching at this point too. This is just straight up Bitcoin. Oh, I got the wrong thing up here. But still, you'll see the same pattern, just a different quoting there. But yeah, I mean, I think just keep it simple. 10,000 or 100,000, I should say, is the level to the downside that I would watch. But yeah, like I said, very interesting moves happening after the CPI report. When when that number came out yesterday, and we were going over that, the numbers came out exactly in line with expectations, both the month over month as well as the year over year coming out in line with expectations. It was just very interesting how the market reacted to that. You would think, oh, the first initial reaction, inflation is still present, but then you kind of have to think about the underlying meaning of what that means in terms of what the Fed is doing on the 18th. And as we went over with Blue, like, there's no change um, in terms of what Fed fund futures are pricing. It's a 97% chance that the Fed is going to cut interest rates on the 18th. So no change. And even though I think that was a hot report this morning, it really didn't derail the Fed's thought process, I guess. Again, we don't know, the Fed's in a quiet period, but it doesn't seem to really change things in terms of what Fed fund futures are pricing in this morning. So in about 20 minutes, we've got some more economic news. We've got the PPI. That's looking for a little bit of a lower number. The PPI month over month, they're looking for a 0.2. Remember, and again, the CPI came in yesterday at 0.3. Final demand year over year, they're looking for 2.6. And then we also get initial jobless claims at 8:30 as well. They're looking for 220K. Just a little bit of preview about what we're going to get today.
Yeah, like you mentioned, initial jobless claims PPI coming our way here in about 18 minutes. I did mention we do have at least a couple earnings stocks to talk about, not a whole lot, but we did have Adobe report, I believe, yesterday after the close. So we can go ahead and talk about Adobe, which is moving this morning on the report. We do have a couple other stocks that are either, analyst stocks this morning to talk about. So we'll get to those before the economic data comes out and then our guest comes on. So yesterday afternoon, after the close, Adobe reported EPS of $4.81. That beat the $4.66 estimate. Sales came in at $5.61 billion, beat the $5.54 billion estimate. So double beat there on both EPS and sales. But then you had the EPS guidance come in a little bit below expectations. They said $2.20 to $2.50. The expectations was $2.55. So the range they gave for EPS guidance was below expectations. The revenue guidance also came in a little bit light. So despite that double beat, the stock is trading lower this morning by about 11%, or $60 here on Adobe. And the analysts were not thrilled with the report either. At Stifel, price target lowered, Oppenheimer price target lowered, Piper Sandler, Deutsche Bank, Mizuho. So across the board, analysts were lowering their price targets on Adobe after this report. Again, decent report for the previous quarter, but the outlook was just not great for Adobe. I don't think if you're a long-term holder, it's anything to be like, oh my God, like that concerned about, but it wasn't the best report in the world. And I think out of all the stocks, Adobe's one that was put in this camp that AI was supposed to help it a lot. And I don't think Adobe has really figured out exactly how AI is going to help drive revenue. We're working on all these things, but AI hasn't driven that much more revenue in the short term yet for Adobe. That's not to say that it won't over time, but it hasn't been an AI winner so far.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head with that. If you're a software company right now, you have to be mentioning AI and what you're doing to kind of get involved with the trend. And, go back to Salesforce reporting earnings a couple of weeks ago, and, Benioff talked up that stock and, talked about how they're making all these changes and new features, new rollouts that's going to have a lot of AI in it. And the headline that I'm reading too, Adobe Sync says weak outlook underlines AI concerns. So if you're not making that transition, and if you don't have much to say in that space, besides the underlying numbers, which you went over, it's a concern that, hey, what the future is and whether or not they've got, some big plan for AI. And I think the stock price has been kind of telling you that over the last year. So this is Adobe on the weekly chart. We were actually hitting resistance going into the numbers. But again, I always like to do this little exercise. This is the software ETF. This is IGV. This has had a heck of a run, since the middle of the summer. It is broken out. It's been very strong. It's at this point it's overbought. But you look at the difference between this and what Adobe is doing, and it kind of just paints the picture that, hey, even before the earnings numbers, I wasn't looking at taking a shot at it, because I think what was into the price was kind of telling you the story.
Yeah, and I mean that's what's so interesting about the about charts, is that a lot of times, like you mentioned, going into the report, it looked like the chart was kind of at resistance. Then the report ended up being not really that positive one of for Adobe. So it's just interesting to me how that tends to happen a lot, where like going into a fundamental catalyst like earnings, the chart also lines up with either at resistance or support, and then you get a move off there, and you look at the chart and you're like, wow, that makes sense, even though it's it's not really one or the other. They're kind of both working together there. I did mention that there were a few other stocks we're going to talk about this morning that just have some news on it. Let's talk about Uber real quick, which got an upgrade at TD Cowen, I believe. So Uber has been kind of beaten down recently. I mean, it's kind of traded against Tesla at certain times, as people, worry that Tesla's going to come in with a robo-taxi and take all of Uber's business. Of course, you have Waymo and Cruise also lurking in the shadows there for Uber. But again, TD Cowen, let me get the exact. So TD Cowen reacts positively toward the ride-hailing company's direction following a meeting with CFO Prasanth Mahendra Raja. TD Cowen analyst John Blackledge says the mobility business UberX should see growth of low to mid-teens year on year as driver numbers increase. Highlights other growth drivers such as Uber for Business, Teens, and Uber XXL. And so Uber this morning is trading higher by about 3%. So getting a little pop here. But again, this stock has gotten beaten up just a little bit. So pop here this morning, but you're still well off the highs for Uber. Highs are about $87. We're down at about $63 right now.
Yeah, I mean, this has been an amazing fall from grace. I mean, and I think as you hear about automation and so forth, this has not been the stock price has been falling based on that. So at this point, I mean, it's pretty amazing, because this was the beginning of October where it hit a new high, and it looked like it was a very strong move. That was 86. The stock is all the way down to 661. It hit yesterday. This is the weekly chart, just so that you could kind of see the pattern. So, looking at this on the daily chart, I don't have any like major support nearby, except for those lows that were reached in August. But man, that's a tough fall. Maybe this is getting at this point is a dip to buy. I'm also watching the 64 level too. That would convince me too that it's got a nice turn. But up 2-3% this morning. What's your personal experience with Uber? Do you use Uber Lyfts a lot, AB?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've only had, I mean, they're about the same to me a lot of times. I'll pull out the Uber app. If it seems like the price they're giving me is like crazy, like I'm going like a mile and a half down the street and it says $30, I'll then pull out Lyft and check that. And sometimes you will find a big disparity where like Uber will say $30, Lyft will say 18, but most of the time they're about the same. I mean, it's great. Like I use Uber every weekend pretty much when I'm, out and traveling. Like I think it's great too. I think, you know, 20, 30 years ago, people were, would ask their friends or whatever to pick them up from the airport. Now I'm like, don't worry about it. You stay there and no need for you to drive 30 minutes, to the
Right.
airport and back and waste an hour of your time. I'll just Uber and be at your place in 30 minutes. So I mean, I use Uber a lot. I've only had good experiences with it.
So have you had the experience before where you order Uber or Lyft and the driver cancels on you? Where it could be where you're going, or it could be if the airport is busy.
Yeah, so that's actually it's interesting because that's where where Uber and Lyft can sometimes not be great, is especially if you're like leaving like a busy sporting event or something, and there's like 100 people trying to order Ubers. There's like a lot of traffic, and it's hard for the actual drivers to get to you. A lot of times they'll like get close to you and then be like, I can't sit through this train, and then cancel it. So like I try to be
Yeah.
smart about that and like Uber at times where I know that the driver will be able to find me, where I'll be able to get in the car. Because yeah, I've had that happen before a few times during like big, like I remember one time I was in New Orleans for Mardi Gras, and it took us like an hour to find an Uber driver that would actually pick us up because people just kept picking up the ride and then canceling it and so on. So I have had that experience, but I wouldn't say that's like the norm for me when using Uber or Lyft.
Yeah, I find that when I really need it, I have issues. I did this. I had prearranged back in the fall. I went to see a Giants game, which we won't talk about that experience in terms of the overall game, but
Game
in
day.
terms of I had pre-ordered. I like the pre-order option. But I was meeting a bunch of people. We were meeting a bunch of people at a particular destination and carpooling over using the Uber. And I was 1 minute late to get to the destination, and the Uber driver. So usually they're supposed to give you they're supposed to text you and say, "Hey, we've arrived. We'll be here for 5 minutes." Nope, the guy canceled, and because I didn't have any other option, I was like, okay, let me reorder. And when I reordered, it was the same guy, and he was charging me like $20 more. So I've had a couple of these experiences. I've had like a bad experience with the airport, trying to leave an airport too when it's really busy. So I find that when you really need an Uber or a Lyft, I've had some issues with it, but I do use it a lot. And normally there's 90% of the time there's not a lot of problems or issues. But I just find when it's really busy, when you really really need an Uber, there could be an issue with the service. Now, so that said, maybe that's priced into the stock, and that's partially why it's gone down, as well as with the Waymo and the Tesla issues. So, I think looking at maybe the $60 level longer term may not be a bad place. So, in any event, interesting chart, interesting story.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think whether you're talking about Tesla, whether you're talking about Uber, like you have to think about these things like Waymo and Cruise, because they're not 5-10 years down the road anymore. They're active in a lot of cities and actively expanding. I believe right now you can get Waymo's driverless taxis in San Francisco and Phoenix, but soon to be Atlanta and other markets as well. And it's like, yeah, I get it. The way that Waymo does their technology, like it's not like Tesla where it's a mind of its own. They have to like map out a city and stuff, but clearly they're able to do that. And so in the next 2, 3, 4 years, who's to say what cities they're going to be in? And I think a lot of times the market is looking ahead 2, 3 years down the road. And I believe Uber and Waymo are actually partnering up in Atlanta or in some cities. So I'm not sure exactly how that works. But it is interesting. And I think, again, if you're investors in these companies, then you have to be cognizant of that. You have to be aware of, Waymo being on the doorstep there and knocking on the door in terms of new cities. Real quick, just a couple other stocks before we get to our guest today. I see Mr. Krull joining us in the backstage. One of my stocks, I saw someone in the chat flagging it earlier, getting a pop this morning, a much needed pop. That is Celsius, which is trading higher by about 3.7% this morning. This comes after we got a couple upgrades here on Celsius, or at least coverage initiated at both Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan. announced his price target of $37 at JP Morgan, $32 at Deutsche Bank. And again, you're seeing a little pop here in Celsius. It's been a beaten up stock. What I will say is that kind of around this $30 level, it seems to have held this level around $30, right below, like around 27, 28, and like a little bit of minor consolidation over the past few weeks or so. That's like the nicest thing. Say something nice about Celsius, the stock. It didn't continue going down once it got to 27. It kind of found a level there and now getting a pop this morning. But other than that, I mean, this stock has been kind of a disaster for me.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's tried a couple times in the last few months to get going. It had a little bit of a bounce there in October, which was short-lived. Like overhead supply kind of got in the way. These blue lines on my charts, basically, they signal where there's overhead supply. We hit this just yesterday and got rejected. So again, this is a lot of times, this is why these stocks that are in downtrends are very difficult, because there is a lot of, there's going to be sellers that are lurking once this name pops a little bit. But it is at least starting to base out a little bit. To your point, it started to kind of hang around this 30, 32 level. I still, from a personal level, I see Celsius still, in vending machines now. I see Celsius a lot more than I used to. So like, I get it. I think that there's already a lot priced into the stock, but I think, just looking at that level that got where it stalled out yesterday, I would watch this, high end of 31 level. And if it could break above there, then you're looking at, maybe 33. Interesting that the price target's coming out. Like, I don't know how much you could kind of put a buy rating on a stock and say your price target's $32. You'd kind of want a little bit more than your price target. I don't know, maybe $40. Even 37 to me is a little bit okay. That's not horrible, but
no, it's not that. It's not that big of a endorsement to say, yeah, we're going to put a buy target on it $7 above. And I mean, that's the higher end one. The $32 one is basically where we're at now. We're at $30.80. So you're $1.20 away from this. I mean, they could hit that price target today, but Celsius kind of similarly to Bitcoin right now. Like, even if it heats up a little bit, I want to see it get past this like $35 level. It looks like we hit that level twice, Christian, around $35, $36, and sold off both times around there. And if we can get above that and kind of fill the gap up to around $40, then I think it starts to become interesting. And like you said, like, I still see Celsius everywhere, especially younger people. I see them drinking Celsius way more than Monster, Red Bull, anything like that. And I mean, Monster is, at the end of the day, a $50 billion company. I'm not saying Celsius is going to become a $50 billion company overnight, but as a $7 billion company, Celsius, a $50 billion company, Monster, and I see Celsius over time continuing to take some market share from there. I have a lot of conviction that over time, Celsius will increase and be larger than a $7 billion company. Does that mean that's going to happen in the short term, in the next 2 weeks, in the next month, the next 2 months? No. But again, over time, I think Celsius will do well. I mean, I know some people in the chat were talking about they've got lawsuits. They had some things to figure out, but a lot of times companies figure those things out. So, so we will.
One thing I would just mention too. Yeah, one thing I would just mention too with the technicals, and I was bringing up the chart that I just had was Monster, which is interesting because Monster hasn't really been breaking out. It hasn't really been doing much of anything over the last year. But I would say, just to give this one more look here, what I do like is you can see I've got these moving averages, and at least the moving averages are starting to, like, a couple of them are starting to turn back up. Like, you can see the 20-day and the 50-day. That usually is a sense that maybe the stock is kind of in the short term has bottomed, that the moving averages are no longer going down. So that also has it too. One other quick note too, because Deutsche Bank also put out, since we're talking beverages, they also put out a buy rating on Pepsi with a price target of 184, just to look at the difference. Man, all of these stocks have been They have not been easy trades, and Pepsi's been sitting right around the lows too. At least that's a better price target. 184, if I'm reading that correctly, 184. At least that's a little bit more robust than putting out something to $2. Oh, we got PPI data that's coming out. Sorry about that, guys. I'll give you those numbers. PPI, well, look at this as a shocker. Well, ex food and energy comes out in line. Final demand month over month comes in 0.4. So that coming in higher than expectations. Let's just bring that up again. And year over year, you're looking at an increase there, 3% versus 2.6 for the expectations. You also have initial jobless claims coming in at 242 versus 220. So that's a little bit higher than expectations.
Yeah, there. I mean, the PPI came in a little bit hot there. Initial jobless claims, continuing jobless claims came in at that also came in slightly hot there. So, how's the market reacting to this, Christian? Looking at the S&P 500, looks like we took a little dip there on the numbers.
Yeah, the initial reaction was, and I don't know why, but prices kind of jumped a little bit, and now giving them back. But overall, not that huge of a move to start.
Interesting. All right. Well, before we bring on our first guest of the day, one other stock that got some analyst love this morning, Constellation Energy, ticker CEG. This, of course, has been a Jim Cramer favorite for a while. And look, I know, chat, you know, you guys hate to give credit to Mr. Cramer. Everything he says is wrong, but he's been pretty right about Constellation Energy. He's been talking about it for a while. Well before it crossed $200. Now up at $242, trading up 2.3% after getting some love from Bank of America. B of A Securities upgrades Constellation Energy to buy, raises the price target to $269. Which again isn't really like that high of a price target considering we're already at 242, but it's a little bit better than going $32 on a $31 stock. But again, getting some analyst love this morning. Constellation Energy, of course, a play in the nuclear space that recently announced the deal. I believe it was either Microsoft or Google to build a modular reactor for some of their data centers. So Constellation Energy has been a stock that got really hot, no pun intended, from not as hot as a nuclear reactor, but got pretty hot up to $290, double topped up there, sold off to around $220. Since then has gotten a pop, then another reversal, and now we're again trading here around $242.
Yeah, this group is really kind of just lost the upside momentum. And even yesterday's price action, which I noticed this with a lot of stocks outside of those big stocks, which we'll cover a little bit later in the broadcast. But I see a lot of this. Like, yesterday was an inside day for the stock. VST, which was mentioned, I was looking at VST coming into the week because we had this nice consolidation, try to turn higher out of the consolidation in an uptrend, and completely failed. And, same thing with yesterday's price action, not that great looking. Also, when you just turn over to the uranium stocks, this was a little bit better yesterday, but again, it's that similar pattern right now. Lower high and lower highs for the last week or so too. I'm continuing to watch names like Oklo too because they're very speculative. They can move very quickly, but not really loving the charts unless we get out of this little pattern of lower highs.
Yeah, Oklo is interesting, long term, of course, as it's, you got Sam Altman involved. And my theory on that is that, over time, as companies that are working with AI and trying to expand their AI capabilities, if they want to do work with OpenAI and Sam Altman, he might be like, okay, well, then you should use our Oklo company, and maybe he might have some influence there. And so we'll see. But, when you've got a guy like Sam Altman, that's obviously, the main guy in AI and one of the top guys in the tech world right now, and he's backing this, nuclear company, it's like, oh, okay, well, this is interesting. And again, Oklo is making small modular reactors that will focus on, building these like smaller energy product or smaller energy for tech companies like Google, like Amazon, that are building data centers. So they're not going to be building these big modular reactors that power the whole grid and power your home. They're going to be signing deals with specific companies to power a specific data center, a specific factory, whatever it is, which I think based on like the regulatory hurdles of nuclear in general, that this would be the way that I would want to invest in it, would be with a company that's doing something like Oklo. There is a ticker also, SMR, which is, small modular reactor is what the ticker stands for. And that's doing a similar thing as well. So, it's an interesting space. Of course, I think these things, got a little bit overextended, but it's no doubt a space that is worth looking at right now.
Absolutely. I continue to watch for now. Not doing anything in particular yet, but I'd like to see strength kind of come back into the space because it's another theme that has been very strong in 2024.
All right. Well, it is 8:36. I've mentioned it. Our special guest of the day, we've got our IPO expert, Eric Krull, hanging out backstage. So, Christian, what do you say we give Eric, our special pre-market prep guest, welcome, and bring Eric back on the show when we come back? All right, Mr. Eric Krull, it's been too long since we've had you on pre-market prep. How are you doing this morning? Oh, Eric, we've got you on mute.
Thank you. Sorry for that. It's great to be back. I like being here, and thanks for that special introduction there. I like the new graphics.
Well, only the best for our best of guests, Mr. Eric Krull. I'm going to go ahead and pop up your slides here real quick. And then let's just hop right into it and start talking some IPOs. This header, I'll read it. IPO activity picked up in 2024, but still lighter than 2017 to 2021. What is going on in IPO land, Mr. Krull?
Well, I thought it'd be a good time of the year to kind of wrap up the year here. And we can see that over the last 3 years, the number of IPOs that are coming out and the value of them in total is growing. But we're still way below what it was, from 2017 to 2021. And of course, 2021, we kind of had that, I'll call it a blow off top on IPOs. What's not even shown there are the SPACs, where there were like 400 more SPACs in addition to those IPOs listed there. And after that, the market got really dry. Of course, we also had the kind of a slowdown in the economy. And when the economy slows down and the market slows down, the IPOs that come out also dries up. But we can see it's growing slowly but surely, which is the typical pattern after a big slowdown like that. And we're starting to see some names come out that are doing well. And we'll show some of those in the other slides. But yeah, the market's getting a little better. And I would have to think that next year will be even better still.
So, Eric, just a quick question with this. I mean, it's really eye-opening because I feel like in terms of the overall market, what we're seeing is there's definitely shades of 2021 and the speculation, and you hear the word froth, recently over the last couple of weeks. We certainly have felt that in some areas that have just gone ballistic to the upside. Your Palantir, your AppLovin, there's 5 or 6 other stocks I can mention too. But it's very interesting when you put it into the context of the IPO market, where we're not at those previous levels. And my question to you was, does that include SPACs for 2021? Because that was such a hot trade too. But do you put this into your overall view to say, hey, the levels of froth or exuberance aren't quite as high as 2021?
I don't think it's anywhere near the level of froth in 2021. First, the SPAC market has dried up, and no one even talks about SPACs anymore. And I think if someone does come out as a SPAC, people look at it really with, like they look down upon it. And I also think where we are seeing froth, and I agree with you on that, we've seen froth and IPOs that came out maybe a year or two ago, but not the ones that came out recently. The ones that came out recently, they don't seem to go up very fast, except for in a couple cases. I wouldn't say frothy on the new ones, but certainly in other areas of the market, ones that are 1, 2, 3 years old, we've had some of that.
Cool. Thank you.
Got it. Well, I'm going to go ahead and flip through this deck real quick, Eric. Just stop me, or I'll go slide by slide, and you
Sure.
stop me on the slides you want to talk about. So, IPO quality since the 1st of 2023 has been below average. What are we looking at here?
Well, what our research has shown, and we put in the Lifecycle trade book, is that most IPOs are not liquid enough to trade by institutions. On the left there, you can see that 28% trade over $20 million per day of volume, and 72% don't. And you're really looking at the 28%, the ones that trade liquid enough that institutions can take big positions and not really move the stock. But in the last 2 years, you're looking at only 15% of the IPOs that have come out since the January 1st of 2023 trade over $20 million a day. So the pickings are slimmer. We really don't look for stocks that trade less than that because they just don't get the institutional support, and they don't tend to rise as much as the others.
Got it. All right, going to the next slide here. Top IPOs since the 1st of 2023. Looks like we've got a few names that we talk about and recognize. A few here that we don't, though. So which ones stand out to you here, Eric?
The ones that stand out are Reddit, Kava, and Astera Labs. And to me, first I'll have to disclose I have positions in all of those. They have been the ones that have really moved a lot in the last 3 months. And in terms of like Chris said earlier, they've looked a little frothy in some ways. Like if you look at Kava and Reddit recently, they're pulling back. They don't look like they're dead yet, but they certainly are due for a pullback anyway. They've had some pretty fast run-ups. The nanonuclear one stands out a little bit in that it fits with what you guys were talking about just 10 minutes ago about those small modular nuclear reactors. I don't believe they've sold one yet, and so the stock is very volatile, and it doesn't trade very much. I mean, it trades over 20 million a day in dollar volume, but since they don't have any sales yet and no earnings yet, it's a very risky play. I'm just watching it. I'm not invested in that. And then a few other ones down the list, like ARM Holdings. That one's in a nice base right now. They've really benefited from the AI industry. And ARM, which it's an older company. It was public, then went private, and then came back public recently. I'm watching that one because it's had a pretty good run up since it came out from its day one close in terms of price. And also it's in a base right now. That might be one to watch for a potential breakout.
And you also have RBRK on here too. I didn't hear that was one that you mentioned that you own right now, but this one just had earnings, was acting very well going into the earnings report, and had a nice gap up from like $52 to 70. Is this one that's on your radar too?
It's on my radar. I don't own any shares. It broke out, and it's had a nice run up since the breakout. It had a good IPO pattern. To me, it's in the IPO advance phase, that phase where you can get a quick run up, and you need to use faster rules in that phase. I expect it to base at some point, and then for a long time, and have what we call the institutional due diligence phase, where institutions really try to evaluate whether or not they want to take a bigger position. And it usually takes them a couple quarters of sales and earnings growth to where institutions start taking bigger positions. And then it goes on to the institutional advance phase. So that one's, to me, in the IPO advance phase, it looks good. If you're in it, it's definitely a hold right now, but I would use fast rules to get out.
All right, going to the next slide here. IPOs you're watching closely. A couple we just mentioned there. What sticks out to you here, Eric?
Okay, well, Klaviyo shows the typical pattern there on the left. They are digital marketing and cloud software. You can see that it comes out, and in that first week, it has a pretty wide bar, and then it starts to go down, and like 91% of all IPOs, they undercut their day one low, and it went into a long base. To me, that's the due diligence phase. And then you see it start to rise off the bottom, and then it gets near the top of the first week there, and that's the turbulent zone. You can see it got very turbulent, and right now it's still kind of in the turbulent zone. If it breaks out from there in heavy volume, that would be a buy, I think. And I believe that would be, in my opinion, going to the institutional advance phase after that long due diligence phase. ARM Holdings, you can see there, they had a very quick IPO base, and then that really big blue bar that, with the 2 weeks in a row up heavy. They came down and corrected pretty sharply and then back up. It's been pretty wild, but right now, in my opinion, it's been going through a basing period almost all of 2024. And if it can break out and get to a new high, I think that would be a buy. And Astera Labs, and that's one we just talked about. You can see it had a very short little advance, a little choppy, then undercut its day one low, came back up. And to me, that's the first base that's forming off the bottom, and it's in the IPO advance phase. And you can see how sharply it's risen just in the last 2 months here. And I'd be using fast rules on that one too.
Hey, Eric. So, question for you, because it seems like there's a lot of these patterns where, obviously the Klaviyo and the Astera Labs, but there's a lot of these where, the company debuts, it gets like the initial pop, as you just mentioned, like the very beginning phase, but then they really sell off, and they kind of, Astera Labs went from up to $90 all the way down to $40, and then then it goes through a little bit of that small and short term like basing, but it eventually, so a lot of these names are turning back higher. So my question is, like, number one, like, this is not from years past, like typical IPO reaction. Like, you used to have hot IPOs and they would just take off. So is this because the brokers are, the investment banks are pricing these more aggressive so that there's very little upside in the first like couple months, but if you stick with it and pay attention, like, these are pretty good companies?
You'd be surprised that the vast majority have been like this always. From our book, we went back to 1982. We identified 6 basic patterns, and the vast majority of them, like I said earlier, they will undercut their day one low before, and then form some sort of, I'll say undercut and then a basing pattern, and then before they move on. The vast majority do that. We found 90% of IPOs undercut their day one close within the first 2 years. 55% undercut it within 3 weeks. So no, this actually is the way it's always been. What we found different in the last few years is that many of these companies, they come public after they've already been rising in their the pre-IPO phase in terms of equity. They come out at a higher valuation in terms of total dollar valuation. They come out later than normal. Like, there's a lot of IPOs that debut after the company's already worth more than $1 billion. So that's the big difference. But the patterns are the same. Like I said, we went back to 1982, studied all these patterns. I'd be happy to send you a free copy of the book so you can look at it and see all the 6 different patterns we identify. But this is pretty common. We're not showing any of what we call the disappointments. Some that come out, like look at the A-Lab chart where it goes down and then it keeps going down. There's a lot of them that do that. You would be surprised how many don't come back.
Right. Good point.
All right, flipping over. This is what we're all here for. IPOs to watch for in 2025. What sticks out to you here, Mr. Krull?
Well, the 2 that stand out the most to me would be SpaceX and Starlink, if those come out, for 2 reasons. One, SpaceX, do they really have any competition anymore? I mean, NASA can't fly any rockets up to the up into the orbiting space station, and Boeing's had trouble with theirs. And SpaceX seems to be the company for space exploration and for launching satellites. And what have they launched? They've launched a lot of Starlink. Okay, you talk about during the Biden administration, they passed that, I forget the name of the bill, but it was over $1 trillion, and it was supposed to include high-speed internet to rural areas and underserved areas. But Starlink can already do it. From what I've seen and read, a lot of that $1 billion or $1 trillion that was going to go toward building high-speed internet around the country hasn't even been finished yet. But Starlink's there; they can do high-speed internet anywhere with all their satellites. So those 2 stand out. I think the other one that stands out just in terms of interest would be Service Titan, not because I know much about the company, but because I think it's debuting today. And I want to warn people, do not ever, and we would recommend never invest on day one. Watch what it does. and then see what kind of patterns form, and then go from there. But I think that one's debuting today, so that's an interest. And then the last one on the bottom, StubHub. I think we all know who StubHub is. Many of us have used it. I'm kind of curious how that one will go. We'll see how that goes maybe next year.
That's a great point that you make too. It's like, be careful of these on day one. Sometimes you get the FOMO of people wanting to get into these companies. I mean, those are going to be really interesting IPOs. I mean, I even have FOMO right now for the SpaceX and Starlink. I mean, those are going to be some very widely anticipated, probably very large IPOs too.
Oh, I think the SpaceX might be one of the biggest ever. I mean, I think I saw a valuation for it of potentially a $200 billion company. And I think, since they're so unique, that could be one of the biggest ever in terms of how much money they raise and the interest.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric.
Asset management, the lifecycle trade. Eric, thank you for joining us here on Pre-Market Prep. Any final words you want to leave us with?
No, I would just say this. When anybody who invests in IPOs, invest only money that you can afford to lose, because they're very volatile in the early stages. I would highly recommend you just wait until they finish what we call the due diligence phase, and that they're less volatile and easier to really get in and hold a position after that one is less volatile.
Beautiful. Well, Eric, thank you again for joining us.
Hey, you're welcome. It's great to be here. It's good to see you guys.
Thanks so much,
SpaceX
Eric.
is finally ready to IPO. We'll call you.
All right, it sounds good.
Stripe's been talked about IPO for 3-4 years now. Still hasn't IPO. So eventually we'll get these big ones that we want. We'll bring it back up and enjoy your Thursday, and we'll chat soon. Okay.
All right. Thanks. We'll see you.
Thank you.
All righty, guys. We've got about 9 minutes left. Let us know in the chat if there are any specific tickers that you would want to talk about here this morning. Let's see, Christian. Any big headlines that we've missed so far?
Oh, and by the way, your mic is fading a little bit. You're going in and out a little bit. I've just been watching kind of just the price action after that PPI data. A bit different than what we saw yesterday with the CPI report, which was, we were just kind of building momentum into that report, and of course gaining there afterwards. I want to go through just a couple quick tickers. Let me just see if I'm going to add this. So overall, what I would be looking for, and by the way, I brought up this DXYZ because they do have a position privately in SpaceX, which has been gearing back up, but that was a big fade. This is a very volatile name. It's a closed-end fund. I know that we've talked about it on the show previously, this DXYZ. So I would also, stress being very conservative in something like this, because it's a closed-end fund. It's not an ETF. And so it's going to move a bit differently. It's also going to be pretty illiquid. So before we go into ticker time, and I think that's great for us to go into, I would say, watch the momentum today. I'm a bit concerned that the overall market breadth, I think it's been something like 8 straight days where there's been more names that are going down versus going up. So I would be paying attention to overall market breadth again today. While there's been certainly winners, and we'll start with the large caps, which were absolutely on fire yesterday. When you looked outside of that group, there wasn't that many groups or names that were doing well. The semis did well too. Broadcom had the news out yesterday morning. That was the catalyst for that stock. That's going to report after the close today. But yeah, we talked about Google in yesterday's show. I did get long Google right off the bat. I talked about this similarly. Notice I've got like a dotted line drawn here, very similar to the Tesla analysis that we were talking about before our guest. And subsequently, Tesla is now trading lower on the day, down about $3-4. But I'm long Google, and I want to be long versus this breakout, which is right around 191. If that fails in Google, then I will probably abandoned the majority of the trade that I put on yesterday. So I'm long versus the breakout in Google. As I mentioned yesterday, and why I liked Google yesterday is because they finally have something to kind of talk about, right? I don't know if they're going to be able to, and that's where the big question I think lies with Google is whether they're going to be able to monetize that quantum chip that they put out. But at least that there's something positive to talk about with Google, which you haven't had. There's been a lot about how they've been losing market share in search. So to me, that was an opportunity to get long Google because it is a bit cheaper than its peers. But if you go up and down this group, Netflix had a good day yesterday, up very close to new highs. Apple's been absolutely on fire, but did have that reversal bar yesterday. So I think I would, at this point, I would not be looking at getting long Apple. I think it's due for some consolidation. Let's see, I don't know what it's doing pre-market. Probably not much. Decently off those highs. Not that much of a mover, but has acted where people want to be. Microsoft has also made a nice move off the lows. I think it could run to 453 possibly. Nvidia, which was dominating this group for a while. It's interesting how all the other names have moved up, but Nvidia still looks a bit questionable to me. And I would watch the 140 level. It's been struggling a bit with that. So nice move yesterday, but doesn't retake that whole candle. And that's kind of what it brings us to today. I would be watching for that. I would be watching for names to kind of retake some of that that move from, what was it, Tuesday, I guess. So that's really what I'm watching. There's a couple of requests for Rocket Lab. I'll bring up. So Rocket Lab is holding in here. I would really be paying attention to this 20-day moving average, right? It had a test of the 20-day moving average a couple days ago. It held and it bounced. It actually broke it intraday yesterday, but it's still holding. So consolidation at this point is fine, and I think that's what you want to see at this point is consolidation and then eventually a move back higher. That's the same thing we were talking about RBRK. Which Eric just mentioned. I want to see consolidation in this name and maybe a move back to the breakout point. One name yesterday that I don't see that many people talking about, which I thought was interesting, was Marvell. In this back into the semi space, broke out obviously on earnings, stepped back a little bit, but nice move back yesterday. Cost does report after the close today. Sorry, I'm going quick, AB. If there's a name that you want to see,
no, this is great. This is great. Let's keep ripping.
Yeah, so Costco hit. Speaking of psychological levels, I feel like there's a lot of stocks that are hitting psychological levels. Costco has one of those. It hit 1,000, and so Bitcoin, of course, the 100,000, Tesla 420. And so Costco hit 1,000 and backed off from there. So that's the level that I would watch in Costco. Reminder that Costco reported same store sales a couple weeks ago, which were not stellar. Still very good, but the expectations are high. So just keep in mind they report after the close. What else do I see? I see Affirm. Let's look at Affirm and Upstart, which those two tickers seem to go in. A little bit, again, sell off. This did retake Tuesday's price action. So I view that as a positive. But ultimately, I have an alert on this stock right around 71.75. I would want to see this resolve higher out of the consolidation. And again, it's a reminder too, we were just talking about the energy names, right? Just because something consolidates, it doesn't mean it's going to resolve to the upside, because this obviously resolves to the downside. So you kind of have to wait for that confirmation. I think that's a very good point. RH has been very strong. I thought that name was going to report last week, but they moved the earnings date. If it catches some momentum, I would watch for a move up to 412. NTAP, sure. I actually ditched this name going back, and I didn't really get a chance to talk about this because the other day we were having audio issues. But I got rid of a few companies that I was holding. I got rid of NTAP, and it worked a little bit. I was able to take one target in it, but I ditched it. I got rid of it on this reversal bar. Another name that I was long was Snowflake. I'm not in that name any longer. So I've been kind of just being a little bit more conservative and saying, and I was kind of caught out of the rally yesterday because I did pare down some risk. I took off Snowflake, and again, if you get out of a name like, I mentioned a couple names that I just got out of. I don't necessarily think that the move is over. I just think that we were due for a little bit of a small pullback. So I would be watching for Snowflake to get back involved and move back above 178.63. Any other names that you see in the chat, AB, to go over?
No, I think we hit most of the ones that people wanted to cover this morning. And that brings us right here to 9 a.m. I'll let you want to do this final one, Sienna Corp?
Yeah, this is interesting. Sometimes names do this where the initial reaction on earnings was lower, all the way down to 64. I don't know if you have the numbers. This will be the last one we'll cover because it's an interesting reversal. If not, I can get you the numbers, AB.
I'm grabbing them right now. So the Sienna reported earnings before the open. EPS came in at 54 cents. That missed the 66-cent estimate. Sales came in at 1.12 billion. That beat the 1.1 billion. So mixed bag there on the numbers. But they gave positive guidance. They said they see full year 2025 revenue up 8 to 11%. Gross margin up 42 to 44%. So the market is liking that guidance there, up about 12% here this morning.
Yeah, good one to end with on a nice reversal to the upside.
There you go. Well, that brings us to 9:01 a.m. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in with us. Thank you to everyone who's patient with Dennis and Joel out. They will be back here in a couple days on Monday. We have an exciting guest for tomorrow. You guys have been clamoring for him, asking for him. It's been too long since we've had him on. So none other than Mr. Mark Chaikin will join us tomorrow morning to wrap up the week, ending strong on a Friday. Hope to see you guys there. Till then, stay green. Thank you again to people who tuned in to watch us today. We will be back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Christian, great job today, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Likewise. Have a great day, guys.